Is your relationship with your business numbers holding you back? Well, pay attention. Tanner O'Brien has flown in from Texas to remove that anchor. This podcast has got one topic: the power of knowing your numbers. And it doesn't matter if you're a person that doesn't know their numbers or you're a person that's in total control of their numbers right now. All that's going to happen in this podcast is whatever your level, it's about to go higher on knowing your numbers and taking control of your future. Tanner O'Brien. It doesn't matter if the results are good or bad. It matters that the results are visible. True or false?
Absolutely true.
So why does visibility be good or bad?
You can't manage what you don't measure is probably the easiest way to look at it. If we don't know what's going on, it's very difficult to know how to make any changes to grow a business or really do anything in that realm.
You can't manage what you don't measure. I think that was originated with Peter Drucker. I don't know if that is for sure or not. So plenty of very powerful, rich and famous people have said that. You can't manage what you don't measure. It means you got to start measuring first.
Yeah.
And is that the Achilles heel for a lot of small businesses?
Yes, I believe so.
Why is it so hard?
It's tedious. It's boring. It's not the glamorous, exciting work. When you think of operating a business, the numbers doesn't usually become the first thing that's exciting to go do.
Is that a mistake?
I believe so. Even from our experience, that's been true.
From your own personal experience, it's been true. It's tedious, it's boring, it's not glamorous. I'll just do something else over there. I'll do that instead. But what are the powers of doing it?
The powers are making the right decisions. We talk a lot about making decisions in business, and that's a big piece of leadership in business is being able to make decisions. But it can be very difficult to make good decisions without data. Now, maybe it's all the data, maybe it's not, but having some data that you can actually look at and see makes it easier to make decisions and make them quickly, especially when it matters.
It's really powerful. You got my attention straight away with all of this. I once learned from someone, the reason that measurement of numbers in your business is the most important thing in your business. This is the most important thing. And it was really powerful and dramatic what they said, because it's the only way that you'll make objective decisions. And in that moment, I realized, without that, you're making subjective and emotional decisions.
Yep.
So what do we need to measure?
I'm a big fan of measuring anything that you can, but anything that's going to move the needle. So, starting with financials, if you're in business and you're not consistently looking at measuring financials, to me that's a given that most businesses should do. But you take it all the way back to what are all the marketing numbers that you look at? What are all the sales numbers that lead to the result of the financials? Financials are just they're a result of everything that comes before it, and then being able to kind of backtrack up to what is the actual activity of the business that is going to lead to the end result of more revenue and more profit and ultimately more free cash flow for the business owner to reinvest or live the life that they want to.
You said a lot of things in there. So you said activity, that's stuff that you measure. So we do measure activities. So because I've heard this language before, KPI, key performance indicator. Mm-hmm. I've heard this before, KAI, key activity indicator, which is obviously, it's part of performance, but it's not a result. Then you mentioned cash flow, you mentioned profit. So if we're going to start with something, where do we start? Marketing, sales, financial, in this conversation right now?
I'd say, especially if you're an established business, someone that's been in business for a little bit, it's not just starting out a day ago. Understanding the financial numbers first, I think, is...
What's the biggest benefit of doing that?
Understanding cash flow and being able to see around the corner with that is a pretty big component.
When you say see around the corner, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I typically like to look at least a quarter out, week by week, in terms of cash flow. Because when you can see where's the projected cash flow based on all the other numbers that flow into it, if we know that there's going to be a week that's cash is a little bit tighter in 3 weeks from now, we can make some decisions ahead of time to be able to alleviate that. Now, that could be changes to expenses. It could be we need to increase our sales here. We need to collect on outstanding receivables. It could be we know that this is incredibly temporary. We can work with our banks and lending institutions to be able to kind of close that gap. But if we can't see that coming, it can really catch a lot of businesses off guard. That to me has to be number one, is being able to see that piece, so you've got the confidence to then invest in the activities and the time and the money into marketing and sales and things like that.
Welcome to the BizX podcast, sharing with you all of the secrets and winning formulas in both business and life, with powerful lessons from guests like Frank Bruno, Nick Jenkins, Brad Sugars, Bianca Westwood, and many, many more. Yet, the sad reality is that over 80% of you aren't subscribed yet. And if that's you, hit the subscribe button now and help us grow this channel so that you can get 1% closer every single week to achieving your dreams in both business and life. Let's do this. Interesting that. So it actually gives you the confidence. So when you said cash flow there, what you're really talking about is a projection.
Yes.
A forward-looking thing. Let's have a look into the future. And a projection is a prediction. Another word for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your best prediction from what you said, everything else flowing into it, these kind of activities. This is your best prediction of the future. Now, do some people predict this optimistically or pessimistically?
Yes. To both. I think it really depends on the individual. I've met several individuals that are incredibly optimistic about what that's going to look like.
Is that denial?
Yeah, it could be. I think what really grounds reality is looking at what has happened before and what's the likelihood of that happening again. So I'm a big fan of one, budget versus actual, or kind of forecast versus actual. But when you look at a forecast financially or marketing, sales, whatever numbers you're looking at, you're forecasting that out. That's not well, I did it, this one time, and now I'm not going to look at it again. Or I'm not going to do anything different with that for the next, 13 weeks. Yeah. It's a weekly process or a monthly process. How close are we to this forecast? Is this still realistic? If this is an activity someone hasn't done, consistently time over time, the likelihood of being good at it at the start, pretty low.
Right.
And that's okay. It takes, I think it's an average of 2 years consistently doing budgeting before you actually get truly good at it and you're within 5-10%.
When we say consistently doing it, do we mean at the end of every week or at the end of every month?
I think it can be either. It may depend on the business.
Right.
I think for most businesses, weekly tends to be kind of the sweet spot. There's some higher turnover businesses, or they have a lot more volume of sales, that looking at things a little bit more daily or even hourly could make a lot of sense.
Wow.
Then again, you've got other businesses that have a very long sales cycle. I was in the mortgage industry for a while, and that was a 90-day cycle. Pretty much any time that we had mortgages, the real estate world. So that monthly might make sense there, or fortnightly might make sense there. So I think it really depends on the industry, but finding a cadence that makes sense and then consistently doing it, and I think at the beginning, the shorter that interval, the better, because that feedback loop is so tight that you can start to make corrections at a much faster rate.
Feedback loop, making corrections. And what you said right at the start of all of that, you suggested 13 weeks, weekly, 13 weeks, projection, have a budget first, track against target versus actual variance, I think you mentioned. So your decision making increases. It's the only way of making objective decisions, isn't it?
It is, yeah. that emotional decision versus logical decision really kicks into logic a lot more when you can see more of the information that's laid out.
Someone once said to me, this is called facing the tiger. And it takes courage to face the tiger, you know, to look at the numbers, because you've chosen finance first, and the numbers don't lie, do they?
No, they don't.
And people do.
Mm-hmm.
Numbers don't. Why do people lie?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a much larger answer to that question. But sometimes it could be, I want to say self-interest, but I don't think that's the right terminology. I think it's...
Maybe lie is an offensive word I'm using there. Maybe, you know, it's just, why do they not tell the truth or face the truth?
Yeah, the...
Fear.
Fear is really the big one. I think that, like you said earlier, having the courage to face the numbers or do the work, it's not always going to be pretty, and that's okay, right? It's being able to just see what's happening allows you to make decisions. Good, bad, it doesn't matter, but allowing yourself to look at things that aren't as pretty, and looking at a forecast that says, hey, 4 weeks from now, we might be out of cash. What decisions do we have to make? Well, they're not always really positive decisions that you have to make, but being able to look at that objectively and remove the emotion. When we look at investing and things like that, I love kind of the psychology around investors and being able to just look at things objectively, taking emotion out of the equation, because the emotion is where we tend to make, on average, maybe not the best decisions in the world, when you can look at things logically, but that's not always easy. It does take that courage, and fear is a real part of that.
Yeah, look, it is. And we're talking finance here first, and we want to give the listeners the confidence to do this. I think the confidence comes once you've done it and once you've made the decision,
Yeah.
Because decision making, when you actually make decisions rather than procrastinate or put it off, there's a feel-good factor to that.
Yeah. I think, to jump on the, once you've done it and you kind of build some confidence there, I think, having that stack of evidence, doing it over and over and over again, it's not just a look at it once. It's not a do the activity once. It's consistency over and over and over again, and the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. One, you learn, so you get better at it, but two, that becomes the new norm. It becomes much easier to consistently do the same thing, but it just takes reps to do that.
Takes the reps. It's all about the reps.
Yes, it is.
And so that means every week. You're only doing one repetition every week, is that right?
Yeah, I would not see a whole lot of progress with one rep.
But what is the rep? What is the rep that we're talking about here?
When we're talking numbers, a best practice that we've adopted, I can speak to the experiences, things like that we've seen. I start every day with numbers. Sometimes it's just a touch base on them. Are we on track? Are we not on track? From marketing all the way through down to finance. The day starts with numbers. Meetings start with numbers. Weekly gets a little bit deeper. We move into weekly reporting to leadership and board and things like that. But it is down to daily, and I think that's important, because the sooner you start and the more consistently you get into those shorter time periods, you're going to get the reps in faster. Yeah. And it just becomes normal to start your day with numbers and take a few minutes and say, where are we? Are we on plan? Are we off plan? Why are we off plan, or why are we on plan? What's working? What's not working? And that leads into kind of the rest of the activities for the day.
One thing you did say about 5 minutes ago, you said it might not be pretty. There was another great that also said that. His name's Phil Knight. He founded Nike. He wrote the book Shoe Dog, and his leadership philosophy is amazing philosophy. And there's 10 points in his philosophy. One of the points is, if we do the right things, it'll be damn near impossible not to make money. Right things. And then his next part of his philosophy after that is, it won't be pretty. the expectation is that it's not going to be pretty. I mean, he's setting his own philosophy out. The expectation is it won't be pretty. If you're going into analysing numbers and reporting numbers and knowing numbers with an expectation it's going to be pretty, are you setting yourself up for failure?
I think so. And I would go as far as to say that this whole process is a process of growth, and growth is almost never pretty. It can be exciting, but it can be a little chaotic and be just uncomfortable, painful even. But I don't think having an expectation that anything's ever going to be pretty or perfect the first time around, I don't think that that's really a recipe for long-term growth.
Now, you might self-reflect on this, or you might choose to think of some other people, because you do coach a lot of people as well. Think of someone that for a period of their life, whether this be you or whether this be someone else, it doesn't matter, I'm not asking this to be you, that didn't know their numbers. Have you thought of someone?
Several.
Okay. So I want you to describe what's going on in their world. What's going on in their life? This is off the back of not knowing the numbers. What's happening?
Yeah. I think frustration is the first thing that comes to mind.
Right. So a person that don't know the numbers, they're going to feel frustrated.
Yes.
What else?
Say unhappy or unsatisfied with the overall results or direction that they're headed, whether that's personal life or business or whatever. Yeah. But
unhappy,
just
unsatisfied.
Like there seems to be a feeling of disconnect between here's what I believe I need to achieve and here's where I am today, and they're not lining up the way that I had anticipated them to. And that feeling that comes along with that, which can be a little bit of frustration, can be just that discomfort. It's that I want to say not knowing. There's that sinking feeling of what that is.
The sinking feeling. You got us with that. You've got us. You've caught our attention. Let's reverse it. So either for yourself or anyone else that you've coached, any of the other dozens or hundreds or however many it is businesses that you've coached, think of someone that absolutely knows their numbers. And describe what's going on in their world.
First thing that comes to mind is then confidence. It's the ability to make decisions quickly. And they may be easy decisions, they may be hard decisions, but knowing them or knowing how to make them with confidence. It's I know that when I make this decision, the end result is going to be X, Y, or Z. It gives a sense of calm, understanding, even amidst chaos, because there's a level of certainty that comes with it. There's a level of I'm going to put in X, Y, or Z resource, time, people, money, whatever it is. And I know that it's going to have some level of result downstream. And I can see that and I can track it. There's clarity, confidence, a feeling of accomplishment even, I think, can kind of come into those are the words that come to mind around it.
Look, I've got it. And I suppose right now, some people listening, we're either preaching to the converted that do know their numbers, and that are confident in the decision making, they're feeling accomplished, they're making faster, stronger decisions with greater belief. So, and I would suspect that would be a smaller percentage anyway, than the people are thinking, "Oh my God, he's talking to me right now." and I just want to ask the next question for the second type of person. Oh my God, this is me. How can I move from that and transition to that for my full business, not just finance?
So from
transition from that feeling of sinking, that feeling of disconnect. What are the moves I need to start making and reps I start need to do to move to this confidence?
Simplicity. I think the first step is to pick one or two things that you can choose to track and measure it. Don't try to change it. I think that tends to be where many folks get kind of off the rails, and it becomes overwhelming and difficult. I'm now going to start tracking some numbers, but I need to influence them. I need to change them. I need to do something with them. It's like, just to start, pick one or two things that you can track.
How do you identify the one or two things? Do the people listening already know those one or two things, do you think?
Maybe some will,
right.
Maybe some won't. I think I'm always a big fan of having conversations with people that have been there and done that. So whether that's mentors, coaches, other business owners that have experienced, that type of thing before, being able to understand what they're tracking and then picking one or two from that list. Otherwise, it can be as simple as I'm tracking nothing today, and I just need to start tracking sales numbers, or I need to track profit numbers. I need to actually do my profit and loss statement. It could be that simple. Now, if those things are in place, then backtracking a little bit. What's one sales metric that you can track? Is it number of sales meetings? Is it the number of conversations I'm having with prospects? Is it number of leads or number of clicks or something like that? You can pick one thing. Every business can be a little bit different depending on what their sales cycle looks like. But picking one of those that you potentially already have a mechanism to track. You're just not consistently looking at it. Picking that one thing that's easy to track first, get consistent with that, then add on another. And then get consistent with it, then add on another. But it's not an overnight thing. It takes 2, 3, 4, 5 months to get really consistent with tracking and understanding the numbers that tell the story of your business.
Yeah, look, me and you have been trained by the same person that wrote that book over your right shoulder there, the business coach, Brad Sugars. Mm-hmm. And he has a knack of keeping things simple, doesn't he? And he true to form, you're sharing some of the things that he shares. And one thing he does say, though, he says, when you track your first couple of numbers, choose one that's an easy one to find, and then choose one that's you're going to have to work a little bit as well. So conversion rate, you got to go dip into sales. What's actually going on? How many meetings have we actually had? How many of them? So that one's a little bit more of a challenging one. It's just going to require a little bit more effort. Mm-hmm. An average sale, that's an easy one. Look at what's the total amount of invoices that you've produced, divide it by the amount of invoices that you produce, and you've got your average sale.
Yeah.
Now, that's a really important number in business, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and like you, get good at one or two, start measuring this. And so at first you said, don't try and change it.
Yeah.
So this was step one, get one or two.
Mm-hmm. What's
step two in transitioning?
So once you've got some numbers, then we can actually start to see what's happening with the numbers. Are they trending up? Are they trending down? Then we can start making some decisions on what's one or two things that we can do to influence that number in the direction that we want it to go. And that then allows us to do a bit of planning. The take it back to the forecasting side of things. And I'm a big believer of the only way to do a proper forecast is to look at what happened the period before. So if we're looking at quarterly, it's
the
what
future
was
is
the
created
last
from
one.
the past.
That's right. So making changes for the next quarter, it's what's one thing I can do to influence that number that I'm tracking and measuring consistently at this time, and then be able to make that move there. Keeping as simple as possible and choosing one or two things that you can actually do with it versus here's a whole bunch of things I can do. Got to keep it simple and focus on one thing that's going to allow us to move the needle a little bit.
Okay, and I'm guessing now, repeat, accumulate, build the habit and consistency like you've just said. So one or two becomes 3 or 4, becomes 5 or 6. Before you know it, you've got a bit of a dashboard emerging. You're beginning to know your numbers.
Yes.
So is there a difference between knowing your numbers and solving problems?
Yeah. Identification of what to solve and then choosing which problems to solve, I think are different skill sets.
Is there a skill set of seeing the gap? I know that's terminology that you actually use in your coaching.
Yeah. There is a skill set to see that.
Because one thing is looking at the numbers, another thing is seeing the gap.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the gaps when you look at numbers?
I can. And
what are you looking at then?
One of the easiest ways to look for gaps. I mean, you can look at industry standards against things, but I think what's the easiest way to start looking for some potential gaps in a business and in our numbers overall is what happened last period. What did we forecast for this period? And budget versus actual, how far are we off? Let's say we've got a marketing number that we're tracking and a sales number that we're tracking. And we have projected a number for marketing, a number for sales, and the marketing number's off a little bit, but the sales number is on kind of on track, but then you've got another number in there, and that one's way off from what you had planned for. Like that becomes the first gap, that delta between budget and actual. The larger that delta is, or the larger that difference is between what you had planned and what's actually happening, that becomes the first gap.
That stands out, doesn't it? I mean, in the way that you've just painted the picture for us, actually, this one's a little bit off, this one's about on track, but this one is way off. Of course, you can see the gap there.
Yes.
It's really obvious to see it now you've said it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And clearly attention's going to go there, isn't it? Once you see the gap, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, that is the beauty of it.
Then it becomes solving the problem.
Yes. Then you can actually look for that right problem to solve. There can be a disconnect between what I feel the problem is and what the numbers actually say. We talked earlier about the numbers don't lie, and you can actually see. You can look at it in the way that we just described. And
have we got an example of that where you feel the problem's this, but actually the numbers?
Yeah,
it's not that.
Yeah, I'll share just an example that we went through, which was a few different steps in the sales process, from showing up to the first meeting, then what happens after the second meeting, and we had this feeling that there was an issue with the show rate to that first meeting. So from lead generator to actual first conversation, had this feeling that there's something wrong there. That's not working the way that we had. And we didn't have the full optics. We knew a couple of the big numbers. We didn't know the smaller numbers in between. So we went to work looking at solving that problem. Additional reminder emails to what's the content in this, what additional phone calls do we need to make to ensure that they're showing up to these meetings. And we spent week, 2 weeks really looking at solving that problem. And then we laid out the numbers and realized that was I want to say it was like an 80% show rate. It's like, that's not actually the problem. The problem was after that call, there was a big drop off to the next step. It's like, so we just spent, 2 weeks of our team's time, which maybe we didn't have actual dollars that was going in, but we're paying team members to do this. We just allocated resources to a problem that we didn't actually have and didn't solve the one that we actually had. So then seeing it allowed us to say, okay, this is where the focus needs to be, made a few changes there. And all of a sudden, we start seeing downstream results because we're solving the right problem versus a problem that we, in our gut, felt like this might be where the problem actually is.
So solving the right problem, I mean, when you start looking at the numbers and you start asking, why is that occurring? So let's go for an example. Conversion rate is down.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of the questions that you ask the team? So why is this happening?
Yeah. We look at the number, conversion rate's down. So it becomes, why is conversion rate down?
And then we're going to get an answer.
start to get an answer. We start to peel back that first layer of what potential challenges could be. Now, if we're looking at, I would say, are there other micro numbers in between, step 1 and step 2 that we need to be looking at? Maybe there's a few conversion rates in there, and one of them is more of an issue than the others. Now, it could simply just be James, we're sitting down at a table, sales conversation. You said no, we walked away, conversion rates down. Then we can ask the question of, well, why was that? What happened in that conversation? Let's dive into the notes from our sales team members. Let's have a conversation with them. Let's see, was it objections that were raised? Was it the value wasn't there? We didn't hit on certain things in the script. That's one of the best things is to understand.
But let's go with one of them examples, because you could do the why, mm-hmm. and really clean it up. So, let's make this up. So let's say, it's because of this objection. And then we ask why. Well, why did we not overcome that objection? And it could be a training gap, yeah?
Could be. Because I think...
It could be that I bottled it.
Mm-hmm. Could be the script wasn't followed. It could be we didn't handle the objection earlier. It could have been a training issue. It could have been... maybe the prospect that's sitting down really wasn't the right prospect for that particular conversation. So there's a number of different things that it could be, but being able to then ask kind of the right questions to ascertain why was the objection coming up, not why did we get the objection or why did we not overcome it, but why did it come up in the first place? What pieces were missed in the process beforehand? Was it a scripting issue? Was it something that should have been handled 3 conversations ago and it just now came up? So there's a number of different ways, but I think the core of it is, why is it coming up in the first place? Not anything against the actual team member that may be sitting the meeting, but why is that coming up in general, so that we can actually attack that, and then we can work with the team to either solve that earlier in the issue or in the process. It could be a training thing, but there's a number of different ways that we can start testing opportunities to improve it.
I'll tell you what I got from that, actually. I'm really pleased that we dug in there, because solving the problem, we're going into solution, yet the detail that we have to go back in reverse engineering this, literally let's go back in detail, and you've got to be prepared to go into detail, and the only way of being prepared to go into detail is if you've got patience to go in there. And if you're going in there, you better be honest. So what was really springing out for me is, if you want to, the numbers are going to show some stuff, they're going to show the gaps, but if you want to solve the real problem, I think what you've said is detail, work backwards, keep going, be honest. Mm-hmm. If it takes time to work it out, it takes time to work it out, but you've got to be patient in that process. Is that right?
100% correct. Yeah. The patience and the willingness to go deep enough to get to the core problem. So we can solve surface problems all day long, but if there's something at the core that hasn't been solved first, we need to get to that. And I think the interpersonal relationships with, say, team members. So in this example, we're talking about a conversion rate from a sales meeting, but giving that opportunity for them to be honest and let them understand that the whole purpose of the exercise is so that we can help them become better, and they get to succeed and do things at a much higher level than they had before. So we want to uncover that. We want to work as a team to always look for where are the areas that we can continue to improve. Like, little micro things have a big impact long term.
Really powerful. Look, we talked about visibility, knowing your numbers, seeing the gap, solving the problem. I think there's an elephant in the room here in the era that we're living in right now, because we're in technology, we're in AI, we're in automation world. And there's a manual nature to some things. Now, does it always have to be manual? Is there AI? How do we automate this? How do we make this easier for people?
I think end all automation leveraging, systems like AI that can take the raw data and put it in a way that is useful for us to make decisions off of, I think is 100% the way to go. The challenge that I've seen just from my experience in going through this is sometimes it has to be manual at the start so that you understand what the process is. You understand what to look for. You understand how these numbers kind of fit together to tell the overall story. I now know that I need to see this number and this number and this number, and then we can start to leverage team members and automation and ultimately AI and things like that to simplify the process overall. But in this world of big data, especially if you're doing anything that's digital marketing wise, there's plenty of data out there. But is it in a format that is usable for us yet? And do we know what that format actually is? Once we can identify what does that format look like, how do I need to see the information to be able to make decisions off of it, then we can automate all day long.
You reminded me of a point that you made really early on in this conversation when you're referring to the manual. Sometimes you've got the manual process. Sometimes you've just got to do the first bit. And you said at the start, it might be tedious, it might be boring, it might be non-glamorous. Can you hire people to do this?
Absolutely.
Do in your experience, do people hire people, or do they try and do it themselves and get wound up by it?
A little of both. I would say for most smaller businesses, it tends to be how much can I do myself before I'm ready to hire people. Now, you can go to the other end of the spectrum. From Austin, Texas, there's a big kind of startup scene in the Austin market, and that tends to be raise capital, hire a bunch of people to do the tasks. That doesn't tend to be the case for most small businesses or kind of Main Street businesses out there, where it does become I now feel like I need to do that all myself, which can be good to learn it enough. But once you've learned enough that you can bring on somebody else to take over that task so you can continue to work the rest of the process, I think that is a massive piece of making sure that this can continue to scale and the business continues to grow. Can't always be, that the owner or the leader of a business continues to do it all. Can you learn to fall in love with the numbers? I believe so. I'll share with you, James, that 2.5 years ago, I knew virtually nothing really about marketing. Didn't like it. It was a piece of things that needed to be done, but it wasn't a skill set that I thought I had until I understood that the marketing is really just numbers. And yes, there's creative aspect in different pieces that come with it. But when you understand the numbers of it, everything else became easier. And being able to tie all of that together, I think, becomes exciting. And when we take a step back and really realize that most businesses are built on the boring work, they're built on the tedious work. We don't like to talk about it much, in the grand scheme of things. But doing doing things consistently is really where great things are built. For me, it's been being able to tie grand, amazing things and outcomes and successes with how the numbers tell the story and how to get there and build that map to get there. And to me, I think it's a really easy way to kind of start to understand how can I start to love the numbers in a way that supports the real reason that I got into business.
I suppose even though it's tedious, boring, it's non-glamorous, I suppose you do get a sense of self-control from it, don't you? You get a sense like, I'm in control here.
Absolutely.
And you start making decisions faster.
Yes.
And maybe more of the right ones because you're looking at the right information. Is that correct? Is it maybe more of the right ones? Because even though you're looking at the right information, doesn't mean you say you're going to make the right decision.
I wouldn't say you're always making the right decision. I think you're making a more informed decision, but decisions are still decisions, and a decision made is still better than a decision not made. Sometimes the decision works out, sometimes it doesn't, but the faster you can see that feedback loop, because you've got the visuals of the numbers, the data, whatever. You can see where a decision maybe wasn't the best decision, and you can go back and learn from that and make a different decision next time. But the speed of being able to make decisions builds upon itself. So it goes back to having the repetitions and being able to get better. All of it is just this cycle of continuing to get better at it, and ideally start to make more of the right decisions, less of the wrong decisions. Doesn't mean that it'll ever be, I'm always making the right decisions. But if we can
business
shift
is a game of risk, isn't it? So
it is, yeah.
So what is the biggest and most beautiful part of knowing your numbers and making decisions? What's the biggest benefit from that?
Peace of mind, clarity. Not knowing what decision to make, I think feels, anxious, depression, things like that. Knowing that you can make a decision, I think alleviates a lot of that feeling. And whether it's right or wrong, you know that you can actually do something about it. To me, that's probably the most beautiful thing to understanding and knowing the numbers.
Really cool. Didn't know what you were going to say to that, but I get it. Peace of mind, clarity. Clarity plus action equals success. Keep your life as clean as that. Brad Sugars once again. What are the 3 best books you've ever read?
Ooh, 3 best books? Man, there's so many. I'll share 3 books that continue to come up as ones that I read usually about once a year, for different reasons. And I think it's a big piece of where I'm at, in my journey overall. One of them, I got to give credit to Brad. The Wealth Coach is one that I will usually go back to about once a year. In conjunction with that, it'll be Richest Man in Babylon. And right now, with understanding numbers and continuously refining the ability to get good at that, Conversion Code by Chris Smith is another one that I really enjoy.
That's a new one, yeah?
Yeah.
The Conversion Code. I've heard a lot of good things about that. I've not read it yet. All right, so those are the 3 best books that you've ever read. What's the best gift you can give anyone?
Opportunity for growth. The word that comes to mind is knowledge, passing down knowledge. But really what knowledge is the opportunity for somebody else to grow. It's how I've continued to grow. I think it's one of the best legacies out there. So I think that is the best gift to be able to give.
To help people see the opportunities they've got in front of them. Big gift. Yeah, I like it. Really like it. And having listened to this, what's the first action that the listeners should do?
Look for one thing that you are not tracking in your business today. Start with that for the next handful of weeks. Maybe the next month.
And just on this subject, I know we've mentioned 3 books there, and maybe Conversion Code is linked to the topic that we're discussing today, which is measurement and visibility of numbers. There's a couple of books that spring into mind from my perspective that are super good on that topic. Have you got any in mind as well for the visibility and management of numbers? Any good books for the listeners? I've got Measure What Matters by John Doerr.
Yeah, that one comes to mind as well. That's a really good one.
And there's another one called Execute Without Drama by Patrick Thien.
I have not read that one.
Oh,
I'll have to put that one on my
You can
list.
read that in 15 minutes. It's tiny. It's like 40 pages long. And it just de-dramatizes your life. And it, in a strange way, you become so motivated to start building a dashboard and measuring numbers. And yeah, so he wrote a really good book there, Patrick Thien. Any others that are springing to mind?
None others that are directly related to it. I'm a big fan of a number of different books in kind of the industry of marketing, especially digital marketing, because I think you'll see a lot of numbers tracking type stuff in the digital marketing space. And any of Russell Brunson's books, .com Secrets, Expert Secrets, those are, to me, they connect very well with the topic, even though it's not directly on it. But being able to kind of understand that there's
metrics and making decisions on metrics.
Yeah.
Is there anything that the listeners can do to move away from this subject matter becoming boring? Because you've said it a few times, tedious, boring, not glamorous. Is that half the battle that we're facing here?
It might be.
What can the listeners do to move away from that?
I really think it's a choice. I think it's choosing to understand that it's a exciting part of what business can be, and shifting the perspective.
You know what I enjoyed and the most, my favorite part of this was when you were solving the problem. The detail and honesty that's required in there, and the patience of let's just get into some detail here. Let's find out, reverse engineer back what's going on so we can start to solve the right problem. You beautifully said, this is how you see the gap. And but then the challenge comes on solving the problem. That's my favorite part. What's been your favorite part?
I've really enjoyed the questions go a little bit deeper. Because at the end of the day, it's not always the most exciting topic, but being able to really talk it through in more of a dialogue to help understand where that goes, that's been really enjoyable for me today.
Tanner O'Brien, thank you very much, sir, for flying all the way over from Texas. All right, so you had some spicy sauce last night on your pizza as well, so you felt just at home. There we go.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Appreciate it.